Hi guys, this is a video on Windows software. I'm basically going to show you how to make your first podcast. Now what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is basically an MP3 or a WMA file or a MP4 or something like that. It's either a music or a video file that you can put on like things like iPods and podcast readers, but they're essentially an MP3 or something like that. So I'm going to start from scratch and I'm going to make my own podcast. So let's get started. I'm going to use Audacity to make the podcast, and I'm going to make it record to an MP3, and then you need Audacity and the lame MP3 codec to do this. So I'm just going to make my first podcast. Okay, so hi guys, this is my first podcast. Please visit www.youtube.com/mobilephone2003 to find out more. So that's my first podcast. I didn't know what to say, so I'm just going to export it as MP3 on the desktop, and I'm going to say podcast 1, because it'll be episode 1. Just click OK. So that's done. I'm going to make another one very quickly. I'm just going to say, this is my second podcast. Please check out mob3.co.uk and youtube.com/mobilephone2003 to see the tutorial on making a podcast. Thank you. So that's my second one. I don't know what to say. So that's going to be called podcast 2. So it doesn't matter about the ID free tag because it's not going to be read. So that's it. I now have 2 MP3s on my desktop which are ready to go as podcasts in 2 different episodes. Now obviously you're going to want to have something to say because mine's just a random thing that I'm just showing you for demonstration. So now the next thing to do is make an RSS feed, because podcasts power themselves from RSS feeds. If you may know RSS feeds from things like websites and linking to websites, but anyway, I'll provide the link to this website in the description. It's a podcast RSS feed generator, and you only need to do this once. So I'm going to say blog website title mob3.co.uk, website URL http mob3.co.uk, website description home of Duncan Mobile Phone 2003. Copyright info, Duncan 2008, I don't know. Website address, doesn't matter. Enclosure title, now that is going to be the name of this. So I'm going to say it's my first podcast. Enclosure description, demo for YouTube. Enclosure link, now you now need to upload this to your website, because you can't have this on your desktop. You need to upload it to a web server. So I'm just going to reconnect to my Mob3 web server. I'm going to make a directory called, I don't know, I'll call it MP3. Double click on MP3. I'm going to drag both of these into here, so to your website, because you can't have this on your desktop. You need to upload it to a web server. So I'm just going to reconnect to my Mob3 web server. I'm going to make a directory called, I don't know, I'll call it MP3. Double click on MP3. I'm going to drag both of these into here. So it's now uploading them. Obviously it's going to take a little bit longer if you have whole episodes, and you've got to make sure your website allows you to upload MP3s and that they've got enough web space. But yeah, there we go. Podcast1.mp3 is going to be the link. So dp mob3.co.uk/mp3/podcast1.mp3. So that's the direct link to the MP3. And it wants to know the enclosure size in bytes, so I'm just going to right click, properties, size on disk, 360448 bytes, 360448. Create RSS feed, and it's got this thing at the top which says XML, and it's got this thing, so you could just drag all of this, copy it, make a new text document, open it, paste it in here, save it, exit. Rename this to podcast.rss. Now this is the file that's going to be constantly updated, so you're going to need to keep this on your computer because you're going to need to upload this to your web server every time you make a new podcast. So we're on the web server. I'm going to go to the main part of the web server, not the MP3 folder. I'm just going to drag this in, uploading it basically. So that's now done. So the podcast RSS feed is ready to go. So if I was to go into iTunes now, because iTunes is the major reader of podcasts, so you see we're in the podcast bit. All you have to do is go to advanced, subscribe to podcast, and type in the URL to it. So http www.mob3.co.uk/podcast.rss. Okay, it's now syncing, and hopefully It may time out the first time because it did before, I'm not sure why. So what happens is you'll get a little eye here. Yes, it's for some reason it says there's a problem. So all I'm going to do is right click and say update. There we go. And it's release date 6. So if I was going to iTunes now, because iTunes is the major reader of podcasts, so you see we're in the podcast bit. All you have to do is go to advanced, subscribe to podcast, and type in the URL to it. So http www.mob3.co.uk/podcast.rss. Okay, it's now syncing, and hopefully it may time out the first time because it did before, I'm not sure why. So what happens is you'll get a little eye here. Yes, it's for some reason it says there's a problem. So all I'm going to do is right click and say update. There we go. And it says release date 16th of the 3rd, description home of Duncan, mobile phone 2003. So just go to RSS. Okay, it's now syncing, and hopefully it may time out the first time because it did before, I'm not sure why. So what happens is you'll get a little eye here. Yes, it's for some reason it says there's a problem. So all I'm going to do is right click and say update. There we go. And it says release date 16th of the 3rd, description home of Duncan, mobile phone 2003. So I don't know why I did that last time I tried, but it does it in the end. And the time is 11 seconds. If I press this down arrow, my first podcast, 11 seconds, demo for YouTube. And this little eye shows a description of everything. Hi guys, this is my first podcast. Please visit www.youtube.com/that-mobile-podcast, and I can now put this on an iPod or whichever. So that's the first one. This is the first one. Now the second one, I've got podcast 2 that I've made. So I need to edit this RSS file. All I'm going to do is get this where it starts with this item. I'm going to copy this right until it ends the item with the / item. I'm going to copy it, and on the end just go press enter and paste it. So it's pasting the same podcast in, but this time I'm going to say my second podcast, and the description will be second demo for YouTube. Publish date. Now I'm not sure if you can have this so it can be at a later date, so sorry about that, that was a bike going by. Anyway, the publish date, now I'm not sure if you can have this as a future date and it will publish itself then on the RSS. Probably should do, but anyway, I'm going to keep this the same, so it's already published. And the enclosure URL, I'm just going to change that to a 2 because we've already got this uploaded in our directory and it's called podcast 2. Now the length is that bytes that we saw before, so all I'm going to do is go to podcast 2 and find out the size of it. 180224. So this is a lot shorter than the other one. And that's pretty much it, because now we've got another item in here that's gone after a first one called the second one, second demo. Publish date is the same, and enclosure URL is the new file and the size of it. So we can now cancel this, save it, upload it to our server. It will overwrite our previous one, so it will ask me, target file already exists, do you want to overwrite it? Okay. And then if I go back into iTunes and update the feed, update podcast, I now have my second podcast, and it's got second demo for YouTube, second demo, publish date is the same, and enclosure URL is the new file and the size of it. So we can now cancel this, save it, upload it to our server. It will overwrite our previous one, so it will ask me, target file already exists, do you want to overwrite it? Okay. And then if I go back into iTunes and update the feed, podcast, I now have my second podcast, and it's got second demo for YouTube, and it says get. So I'm going to say get, and it's downloading it. This is my second podcast. This is my second podcast. Please check out mob3.co.uk and youtube.com/mobile. So that's done both of my podcasts, and it's now in iTunes. Now, if some people will want to have their iTunes podcast, they want to have their podcast in iTunes Store. Now, to do this, I think you have to have a account with iTunes, and then you can upload your own podcast. But I haven't managed to do that yet, so I will do that in a second. But you can then, do it like that, and all you need to do is provide the link to your podcast RSS feed on your server. So if you thought making a podcast was difficult, it's really not. It's very, very easy. It's using the power of RSS. Now there must be some ways that you can do it where you can upload it to a website or something, and it'll be even easier than this, but I'm just showing you very, very crude, basic way of doing it, so you know what, if it goes wrong, you know exactly what's happened. So you're just copying this item tag, which is actually an HTML, well, it's an XML, not HTML. XML is a different language, and you're just making another one and then updating it with your new stuff. So I hope this helps anyone who wants to make a podcast. It's very easy to do. Just make sure you have something to talk about and make sure it's a subject that you know, because you'll eventually run out of ideas and what you want to say. So thanks for watching my video. Please comment, rate, subscribe if you like my videos, and thanks again.